Also, Madam Chair, I have a bell, so when speakers are going, I will ring the bell once at 2 minutes and I'll ding the bell twice at 3 minutes.
That's terrific, thank you.
Interesting. Yeah.
Through you, Madam Chair, we're live now. I'll start admitting people into the room.
Thanks, Dawson. I'll formally commence tonight's meeting of the Bayside City Council Local Planning Panel. My name's Marcia Downey and I'm the chair of this evening's panel. Before I start, I'd like to, on behalf of the council and of the panel, acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we are meeting this evening and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We had no apologies that I'm aware of, so we did have one declaration of an interest, which I'll ask you to note, please, Jesse.
Either my computer goes.
Yes, thanks, Marcia. So my name is Jesse Han. I'm a community representative on the panel. I'm declaring interest in item 6.3 on the basis that I'm a member of the Bexley RSL Club, which is adjacent to the site. However, I'm not a member of the RSL board or staff, so I consider it to be a non-significant, non-pecuniary interest, and I'll remain for consideration and voting on the item.
Thanks, Jesse. So having done that, I'll just provide some introductory information about the purpose of the Bayside Planning Panel. The panel is charged with considering planning proposals of any scale and value and determining development applications where the value is less than $30 million, where there's a potential conflict of interest, where it's contentious development, there's a substantial departure from development standards, or where it's sensitive development. In particular, the panel must consider development applications which have attracted 10 or more unique objections in a public meeting. And that's the case with some of the agenda items this evening. Others can be considered outside of a public meeting, and all decisions are published on Council's website, normally within 48 hours. This public meeting is being recorded and is live streamed to Council's YouTube page. The recording is an official record of Council and may be made available to people who request it in accordance with the Freedom of Information legislation. We have a number of people registered to speak. When it comes time for your item, you'll be asked to unmute your phone or computer at the relevant time to address the panel and to answer any questions that we might have. Alternatively, members of the public may have registered for the meeting by making a written submission, which has been provided to the panel members. So the panel has had the benefit of reading the information about all of the submissions that have been submitted in relation to each of the agenda items this evening. Once the panel has heard from all of the speakers, including applicants, we will adjourn to consider our decision, and that decision will be published on Council's website within about the next 7 days. So before we start with the agenda items, I'd like to introduce the panel. So I'll go first. My name's Marcia Downey and I'm the chair of this evening's panel. My background is as a lawyer. I've practiced law for about 35 years and much of that time planning law. I also have expertise in governance and public administration, having worked as a senior executive in state and local government. And in addition to this planning panel, I also chair the RIDE planning panel. I'm involved in regional planning panels and also government committees and an affordable housing company. Ross, if I can ask you to introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Marcia. My name is Ross Bonthorn. I'm an architect planner. I'm currently and have been for many years now involved in a number of large-scale mixed-use urban projects, both in Australia, Asia, India, the Middle East, and also I have served as a councillor for the City of Sydney, became chairing some of the planning committees, was then appointed to establish Pittwater Council, was elected as a councillor to Pittwater Council, and subsequently have served on a number of panels for both state and private enterprise, including the Bayside Local Planning Panel, which is meeting tonight.
Thanks, Ross. Tony?
My name's Tony Reid. I'm a chartered professional engineer, currently working as a consulting engineer. I've had over 35 years experience as either a Director of Engineering in local government or a General Manager in local government. I also am a member of the Parramatta City Council Local Planning Panel. Thanks,
Tony. Jesse?
Thanks, Marcia. My name's Jesse Hanna. I'm a community representative on the panel. I'm a lifetime resident of Bexley in the Bayside and former Rockdale LGAs. I'm a solicitor by profession, and I currently work for the New South Wales public sector.
Thank you, panel. We have some minutes of a previous planning panel meeting of the 28th of June 2022, and this panel notes that those minutes have been confirmed as correct by the chairperson of that meeting, which was actually me, so they are correct. We have no planning proposals, and we have, as I said earlier, 3 development applications, and we'll deal with them in the order in which they appear on the agenda. The first development application is 81 Holloway Street, Banks Meadow, and this application is for construction of a 4-storey seniors living development with ground floor car parking and retail tenancies and removal of trees. We have the recommendation for approval of this development application, and we have one person to speak against that recommendation for approval, and we have 4 people to speak in favour of the recommendation to approve the development application. So I'll invite Miss Alice Zeng, who is an affected neighbour and registered to speak against the recommendation for approval. If you're there, Ms. Zeng. Actually can't see anybody with those initials on the screen, but we'll just wait a little while. Alice Zeng.
Through you, Madam Chair, Alice has just put in the chat box that she's unable to use her mic.
Okay, well, we might start with the people registered to speak for the recommendation, and then Ms. Zeng might be able to sort out her technology and address the panel when she's able to do so. So we've got 4 gentlemen. Oh no, we've got Ian Calmert, Jonathan Lee, and Daniel Keary, and Chloe Martinelli. So I'll leave it to those people to decide who's going to speak first and whether you're all going to speak.
Thanks, Marcia. It's Dan Keary here. Jonathan, are you happy for me to go first?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. So we've provided a copy of our submission to the panel, and I'll briefly speak to these points, and then Jonathan from Platino Properties will address the panel with some comments on some of the draft conditions of consent. By way of a brief introduction to Platino Properties, its model for seniors housing development is to address the growing demand for seniors housing through developments which allow residents to age in place with access to a range of facilities which encourage seniors to remain active and which attract a broader age bracket of seniors. This includes a designated concierge service, which also coordinates the provision of home care services where required. Under this model, independent living units provide appropriate homes for seniors on sites that are close to transport and health facilities and other services, enabling integration of their residents into the community. The proposal before the panel is consistent with this model. It's for a 4-storey seniors living development at 81 Holloway Street, Banks Meadow, comprises 29 independent living units, 2 commercial tenancies at ground level, a common room and terrace with rooftop garden on the 3rd floor and ground level car parking. As noted in the officer's report, the site is well located in relation to transport and services, and it's located less than 150 metres from the Pagewood local centre, as well as being within walking distance of multiple bus routes. The DA was lodged under the former SEP for seniors housing, and it's entirely consistent with the provisions of that SEP, which encourage seniors housing on sites with good access to transport and other services and development of high quality design. I'll briefly address two issues that were raised in Council's assessment report. Firstly, as noted in the report, the DA includes a clause 4.6 request to exceed the 12-metre height control. It is important to note the maximum proposed height of 14.8 metres is limited to a single plant room centrally located on the roof. The majority of the height exceedance is limited to the upper parapet of level 3, which has a height of 13.2 metres. As noted in the officer's report, these are minor exceedances, and the proposed building height is compatible with the established built form of the locality. In particular, the adjoining development at 32 Page Street is substantially higher, 3 to 4 stories higher, and the proposal before the panel provides an appropriate transition in scale to the lower density residential areas and the Pagewood Public School to the north. The applicant also undertook extensive pre-lodgement consultation with council officers and provided 2 briefings to the Bayside Design Review Panel. In response to feedback received from council officers, several design amendments were made to the scheme. I've listed these in the submission, but very quickly, these included improved solar access and cross ventilation of apartments, relocation of the communal garden from the Green Street frontage to the rooftop, improved layout of the communal area on level 3, increased landscape and deep soil areas, reduced number of car parking spaces, and the inclusion of a range of additional sustainability initiatives, including electric car and bike charging points, rooftop photovoltaic solar panels, and rainwater harvesting and reuse. As noted in the officer's report, the resulting development has demonstrated a form of high quality architecture which integrates environmental and social sustainability design. That's a quote from the officer's report. The second issue is overshadowing. We note that a number of submissions were made to the DA raising concerns with potential overshadowing of neighbouring apartments at 32 Page Street. We've provided information to council both in the SEE supplementary information and some more recent information provided last week, which include shadow diagrams and view from the sun diagrams, which clearly demonstrate that the proposal does not cast any shadows on any apartments of this building between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. on June 22nd. Therefore, as noted in the officer's report, the proposal complies with clause 35 of the senior SEP, which requires adequate daylight to the main living areas of adjoining development. So in conclusion, we're pleased that the officer's report reflects the extensive consultation we've undertaken with council throughout all stages of the DA. We consider all issues have been adequately addressed and that the DA warrants approval. Thank you.
Dan, can I just ask, you didn't talk about parking, and the panel has noted that there's a shortfall of around 20% in the parking. We were just interested to know what work was done to try to prevent that sort of shortfall, which is fairly significant. I think you'll agree.
Can I address that?
Whoever would like to address that, please do. Yeah.
That's Jonathan, yep.
So my name is Jonathan Leeb. I'm the director of the applicant. You'll notice that the plans before you for consent don't have a shortfall in parking, but rather a condition of consent that the council officer is proposing to remove cars would create a shortfall. In fact, in the process of iterating with council, our original plan had substantially more parking, but on 2 occasions, council has asked us to reduce parking, which we have done by a factor of. It's still compliant with the minimum required in the plans that are before council. I note that the plans that are before council have parking on the western side of the existing right-of-way. There currently are 20 cars that are approved in a live consent in that location. But at council's request, we reduced that to approximately 10, and it still complies, but there is a further condition of consent proposed, which would reduce by removing another 10 cars. Council's officers were of the opinion that there were sufficient cars and they wanted less. We would prefer to have the more cars, but we are accepting if council chooses to put that condition of consent on us.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the panel?
Well, the reason that the cars were removed was to retain the effectiveness of the bioswale.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, can I respond to that?
Yes, please do.
So there is a bioswale on our neighbour's property, and that will still remain there. There is an approved consent to place 20 cars in that location, which is currently live and on foot. But so be it if council doesn't want this consent to replicate the existing approved consent.
But if I can just clarify, the approved consent doesn't have 20 cars located on a bioswale.
No, it does. So just to be clear, there are two consents. The first consent was DA 2014/80, which placed the bioswale on that property. And then subsequent to that, DA 2017/1125 was put before council to put 20 cars on part of the bioswale, and that was approved. And that consent is still on foot and active.
Okay, thank you.
That's for the preschool.
Sorry?
That was for the preschool and associated development.
Yes, that's for the consent.
7A?
Yes, that's correct. That's for the consent for the multi-storey office and preschool.
Marcy, just as clarification, so there is an application which is for a totally different project which did consider cars on the bioswale, but this application may or may not necessarily be supportive of the cars being still on the bioswale.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
I have a question for someone from the applicant as well. There's been a suggestion about the laneway or the right-of-way and whether it should be one-way or two-way, or whether it could be one-way in order that it actually tries to address some of the pedestrian access that happens along it, but also the connection back to Green Street. Do you have any opinions on whether it's best to be two-way? If it can actually be two-way because of the width of the laneway connecting back onto Green Street? Just a little clarification of that as a traffic management system. And then a further question as to where the loading, unloading, garbage trucks, general servicing of the project would happen based on something being shown on the ground floor plan on the southwest corner. Is that still what's proposed? Because there has been, as no doubt you're aware, significant concern from the residents of the project behind.
Sure, I'm happy to address that. So firstly, the existing right-of-way over our property is currently covers about 2/3 of that road or that right-of-way. It's already been built. It's currently operating as a two-way right-of-way. And the reason it's operating as a two-way right-of-way is because it enables both cars and loading to go to and from 32 Page Street. We'd have no concern one way or the other if council chose to make that one way, although I do note that if they did choose to make it one way, it would send the occupants of 32 Page Street on a bit of a roundabout circuit to go around a particular purpose when they can get into and leave from their property quite effectively. If you look at, there's a drawing, I don't know if you have access to, but if you look at DA 102, you'll see that the entry to 32 Page Street is quite close to Holloway Street. And as a result, all the cars, they come in from Holloway Street, they enter the single access point, and then they exit from that access point in a two-way process. The same thing at present for the loading for 32 Page Street, which enters from Holloway Street and exits from Holloway Street. I mean, particularly the cars from next door, there's approximately 250 cars next door at 32 Page Street. I think it would be much simpler if they exit and enter in a much cleaner, quicker path from Holloway Street, rather than to go around our entire building and exit at Green.
And if you could just respond in terms of where the loading, unloading garbage trucks, and if at the moment I think it's suggested it's on the southwest corner, sorry, southeast corner. Or
so 32 Page Street loads from the southeast corner of our site. That's correct. It was our preference to load a bit closer, as per DA 102 in the submitted drawings.
Yes.
But it has the same issue that if council chose to remove our proposed location, then we would be forced to do so from the southeast corner of the site. The reason we chose that particular location is because it's closer to where the garbage area is and the stairs and the lift and so forth. But notwithstanding that, if they did make us use the same area that 32 Page Street is, that would be approximately, 15 metres to the south, 20 metres to the south. I mean, that would be acceptable.
Why would there not be some form of loading and servicing adjacent to the area which is called residential garbage area and retail garbage area?
Well, that's what
we may lose a few motor cars, but at least there is a servicing location which is adjacent to lifts and to the way the building would operate.
Oh, well, so we proposed that on the western side of the right-of-way. The reason we didn't propose it on the eastern side of the right-of-way is because most of the height of that car park is 3 metres or less, and the trucks that are potentially want to access, and certainly the garbage trucks, would be higher. And we didn't want to jack up the building.
Maybe they have to be accommodated somehow. I mean, that's criteria, but that doesn't mean it could not necessarily be accommodated in order to provide something that is a workable solution for servicing your project.
Right. So we're not actually asking to service our project from either Holloway Street or Green Street. We were asking to service it from within our own property. And if council allowed us to do it in the location we have suggested, which is directly opposite the retail garbage area, then we would be so pleased. But if they chose not to, we are able to load from our own driveway.
Okay. And the width of the connection back to Green Street, in your mind, your advisors are confirming that that is wide enough for two-way traffic?
So council has a condition of consent requiring it to be 5.5 metres, and we will accept that condition.
I mean, I guess my question is it physically possible to be 5.5 metres?
Absolutely, and there is an easement already that is that width wide.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Leib, Jesse Hanna, community representative, are you proposing to extend the right of way to Green Street at the beginning of construction to allow the trucks to exit via Green Street?
Yes, it's our intent. It is our intent to open that right of way immediately, but not to build the formed road. Allow the trucks to use it with a temporary access to Green Street, but then finalise upon completion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Leib. Any other questions for the applicant?
Not from me.
No, thank you.
Ms. Donny, would it be possible that I could add my submission?
Yeah, please do. Yep.
I just wanted to say a couple of things. We have
still Jonathan Leib, is it?
Correct, Jonathan Leib. Yes.
Please go ahead.
So I just I wanted to reinforce what Mr. Keary said. We have been trying to engage with council in a collaborative manner as possible. We had 2 pre-DA meetings and then subsequently 3 meetings, at which point council asked us to make modifications to our plans, of which we have done each and every time they requested to do so. We appreciate the opportunity to work collaboratively with them and then consequently their recommendation for approval. There is 161 conditions that they have placed on our consent, and there are 4 that I would like to raise for your consideration, which we think are perhaps not appropriate, and for you to make amendments to those 4 conditions if you thought appropriate. The first relates to the electricity substation. We had proposed to put the...
Would you mind just taking us to the actual condition, and if you've got the agenda, the page number of the agenda, so that we can all understand which conditions you're talking about? Sure.
So as it turns out, council has 5 conditions on the same issue. So starting at 43A.1.
Just a moment till we all get up that condition. Do you know what page of the agenda that's on?
Page 60.
Okay. Does everybody have that?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll read it to you. It said, all proposed parking spaces, loading bays and substations along the western side of the site shall be removed from the plans and replaced with tree planting to the satisfaction of Bayside Council. So this is obviously where the cars and the loading got removed, but it was also where the substation got removed. And in this particular instance, I'll just address the substation. The proposed substation location can be seen on DA 102. Yeah. It's marked in red, and what you'll notice is that it's in close proximity to the substation for 32 Page Street, which is also shown on that plan, and it is 70 metres from Holloway Street and a little more than 40 metres from Green Street. It's not visible from Green Street, obviously, because it is behind the building, and it is also behind 70 metres of vegetation from Holloway Street. So it's not actually visible from the public domain. It is also in close proximity to where council's current DA on foot, DA 2017/1125, has the approved electricity kiosk. And obviously it's close to where DA 2014/80's kiosk is. I mean, council has clearly, consistently and repeatedly indicated to us that that was an acceptable location for a substation kiosk. And we would appreciate it if it could stay there, particularly since it's near the Ausgrid's easements. And also if we did move it to within the building, obviously that would, in order to comply with Ausgrid's requirements of minimum heights around the substation, it would increase the building height by approximately 50 centimetres.
Okay, so, we'll get some advice from council staff on that one. So we've noted that question. Thank you.
Okay, so if they did choose to proceed, we've put a written submission which indicated the 5 amendments to the conditions of consent, which all refer to the same thing.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, the second thing is also a somewhat technical thing. It's about based on the hoarding requirements that council has placed on us. Council has requested that we...
Which condition, Mr. Lee?
87.
Just a second, we'll just find that one. Page number, do you have that?
I think it's 72. 72. It's a long condition that runs on for a whole page or so, but in effect what it says is that we require both a hoarding on the boundary constructed of solid materials to 1.8 metres of height, but also an overhead type de-hoarding on council's footpath. That's the kind of condition that you would normally see in a city environment if you were building on top of or immediately adjacent to a footpath. But given that our building is at back at least 3 metres from Green Street and at least 9 metres from the Holloway Street boundary, we can construct a solid hoarding on the boundary that's 1.8 metres of height and a safe scaffold system that's completely on our property without the need to put any hoardings on council's property or anything like that. And so we made a submission, you probably got it yesterday, which suggested some wording, and I'm happy to read it. Suggested.
No, that's okay. That did come through, and we were discussing it before the meeting. So we'll just need to have a further discussion about that and get some advice from council staff.
Okay. Then, in which case, I'll move on to car charging infrastructure. We are very supportive of putting electric car charging infrastructure in.
And which condition is this one?
64D.
Yep. Page 67.
It's just that what council has suggested we don't think is equitable or efficient. Rather than identifying a minimum of 20 car spaces, 9 car spaces to have level 2 car charging. Level 2 car charging is what we put in our shopping centre developments. We would much prefer that every apartment owner, every senior would have access to at least one level 1 domestic car charging electric infrastructure. So the challenge you have is people having to move their car in the middle of the night. It just doesn't really work. We'd much prefer that we put domestic level car charges in, and we have 1 per dwelling rather than to share the higher speed ones or select 9 lucky people to get them.
That's clear. So we again, we'll just get some instructions on that one.
Okay. And then the last thing I just want to note that there was that previous DA 2014/80, which was completed construction only 3 or 4 years ago, 2019, I think, and they built a brand new footpath around the site. Council has given us conditions of consent, on the one hand, to construct a brand new footpath, 102, condition 102, part 1, but also they have conditions which require us to take a dilapidation report of the existing footpath and then repair any damage to that footpath. I'd just like to suggest that, given that the footpath is only 3 years old and that we will be doing a dilapidation report on it and repairing any damage we would do to it, I think the condition to create a new footpath where the existing new footpath is could probably be removed to be more environmentally friendly.
Okay, we've got that. Thank you.
Okay, that's all. I'm open to any questions.
I didn't have anything, Mr. Lee. Panel?
Nothing from me.
Nothing from me.
No, thank you.
So I think that's it. We also had 2 other speakers. We had Mr. Calmec, an affected neighbour who is registered to speak. Are you there, Mr. Calmec? And we had...
I am.
Yep. Mr. Calmec?
Good evening, panel. I'm a neighbour that lives in the building across the road from the new development. There are a number of concerns which I have submitted and a summary page. And I'm just going to go through briefly what's on the summary page.
So, Mr. Calmec, can I just clarify? You're speaking against the recommendation to approve the development. Is that right?
Well, my view is personally that I would love this development to go ahead, but there are certain things that I would appreciate if they could look at it in a better light, and we could all mutually agree to something that's a lot more beneficial to both parties.
Okay, please go ahead.
Right. So basically, with the traffic during post construction and after construction, the noise and the dust is going to create a massive problem. People with allergies like myself who suffer from asthma. The proposed detailed plan for traffic in the area with parking, while it's under construction, I haven't seen anything of that. And I'm not sure how they're going to cope with that kind of issue. The intersections are extremely busy at present, especially with the schools around. So I should imagine that they've taken some precautions regarding safety, which we would like to know about, regarding pedestrians and children. The roller shutter noise doors of the garage going up and down each time a resident moves into the new building will probably cause a noisy disturbance, and that should be looked at, and maybe there could be another avenue of where they could put the roller shutter doors. Construction hours, Saturday morning at 8 o'clock is more of a reasonable time than 7 o'clock. Weekdays at 7 to 5 is fine. Heavy drilling and vibrating should be limited to weekdays only. And we should be notified because I work from home, and to sit right across the view of a construction site with heavy drilling and noises and dust, it could be quite irritating towards telephonic conversations and Zoom meetings that I spend my day on. The shadow diagrams, we haven't been exposed to them at this point in time. It was mentioned that they were produced and that there would be no shadows on the building over a certain period of time. I have yet to see them. They weren't put up on the council portal either. Waste management, to have the construction waste in a different location to underneath the windows of the apartments. So while construction is going ahead, the bins were to be located directly under our windows, which I think would create smells, dust, and who knows what other rodents it brings to the area. The proposed cleanliness of during and post construction, of how they're going to maintain the area, and the dust that's going to land up on the building of Silkwood. The bins to be contained within a building site to stop odours from being transferred. So in other words, we have a building that contains the refuse bins, and it's washed daily or washed regularly, and we don't have bins being exposed to the natural elements. Ongoing cleaning of the laneway after completion. I would like to see who's going to be responsible. We maintain that from a cleanliness point of view at all times. Smoking of construction workers outside our windows with the smoke filtering through into our apartments is also another major issue. In conclusion, I just want, my views are that I'd like this whole thing to be transparent and that we get feedback. Like, for instance, the shadow diagrams, I'm only hearing about them now. And we want to ensure a positive outcome for all, for the developer, for the people of Bayside and the neighbours. We actually would really like this development to go ahead. And to openly discuss any possibilities, issues with the parties concerned, not just to hide behind a council running here, there and everywhere and sending in applications and things like that. You know, if you sit down and sit around a table, we can come to an amicable conclusion and decisions to make things happen in a more positive manner and make this thing work for everybody. I'm sure that Bayside want this to go ahead, because, you know, it's going to be, from an aesthetic point of view, appealing to the eye for the area. It makes sense, but we need to work in harmony together. Unfortunately, we have to do that. That's it.
Thanks, Mr. Kalmick. Many of the things that you've identified, they're all very important issues that you've identified, and many of them will be dealt with in the traffic management plans and the construction plans that will be required as a condition of consent.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering, and council staff might be able to help me with this, or even the applicant, how the detail of the things that you've raised can be captured so that it can, we know that those issues will actually be included in the construction management plan and the traffic management plans. So we've obviously taken a note of them, and many of them would just be captured as a matter of course. But council staff, can I just ask for some advice about how ordinarily the approval process for those plans takes place?
Yes, usually they are required to be submitted prior to CC for review. They are reviewed by the development engineer and given written approval.
Thanks. So the applicant would ordinarily submit them, Mr. Calmeck, before they apply, or at the same time they apply for their construction certificate. So that's before any work actually happens on site. And then council staff will have a look at them and also refer them to the council engineers to make sure that they cover everything that's needed to be covered.
Yeah. Okay, I understand that. It's just that we want this thing to be a really positive experience for everybody. We know that for 2 years it's going to be a lot of noise and dust. We understand that, but it's how you manage it. It's with everything in life, how you manage it, how you run your business, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, the decision hasn't yet been made that it will go ahead.
Oh,
but
okay.
if it does go ahead, I'm sure that the last thing that the applicant wants is arguments with the residents and concerns about the way that their workers are conducting themselves and the impacts of their construction on residents. So I'm sure that's right. Mr. Lieb?
Yes, absolutely. And we're happy to engage collaboratively, and we have done many times in the past, and I think our reputation supports that. And Mr. Calmeck, we did not realise that you personally had that level of interest, but we're more than happy to consult you before we put in our construction management plan.
That'll be fantastic, because I am also on the Strata Committee here, and we could take it to the Strata Committee. We could have a general meeting with them and, have a look at it from that positive angle.
We'd be happy to.
And you've taken a note, Mr. Lieb, of all of the points that Mr. Calmeck has raised in any event. So
I tried to as many as I could, yes.
Yeah.
I have a list which I have submitted to council.
Yeah, I saw that come through. So
yeah,
it can be provided in the event that the decision is to approve the application, that could be provided to the applicant. And the shadow drawings should be placed on council's portal. So I'm not quite sure why they're not there, but council staff will attend to that so that you'll have access to them as well.
Fantastic.
Can I suggest that we did actually, I think the shadow diagrams have been advertised. It's just that council officers asked us for additional shadows every 30 minutes, and we are more than happy for them to be made available. But as I would suggest, we made them available to the council 6 months ago, and we made them available to this panel when they were re-requested last week. But you will see that they show that there is no sunlight, so there's no shadows cast on the facade of 32 Page Street at all between 9 and 3 on June 22.
Through you, Madam Chair, those shadow diagrams have been uploaded onto Council's DA tracker.
Yes.
Okay, so Mr. Calmeck, you can see those if you go back into the DA tracker.
Yeah.
You can find them.
I had a look for them yesterday and I couldn't find them. Yeah. And maybe they've been put up since then.
Mr. Calmeck,
that they're there so that they.
Great, thank you.
They're at the rear of the architectural plans.
Okay, they're at the architectural plans.
Thank you.
We also had Chloe Martinelli, Ms. Chloe Martinelli.
Madam Chair, could I ask Ross Bonton a very generic question to Mr. Lieb? It may well be covered. Is it possible that the construction, if it were to proceed, would be accessed purely from Green Street and not accessed from the right-of-way?
Well, it would be our preference to enter and exit in a forward direction without necessarily, at some point the building will be built and we will need to enter or exit from different locations for construction. But possibly we could look into using, well, we could look into certainly minimising it as part of the construction.
Yeah. You understand the reason for the question, because obviously the conflict that will or could occur during construction is between the vehicles trying to access the car park for Silkwood and the construction vehicles, concrete trucks and various others. So, I mean, looking at the site, Green Street didn't seem, when I was there, to be particularly busy as a street. And if it were possible to optimise, if not maximise, the access to the construction for the project from Green, I'm sure it would address a lot of the concerns that have been raised by the residents.
Yes, and I would say that in the vast majority of cases we can do that. We can build the access from Green Street at the outset, And then that would, if we didn't leave via Holloway Street, it would require our construction vehicles to do a 3-point turn in the loading dock area of our site in the southwestern corner of the site. And that could be done for all but the very largest of vehicles. For example, when we were installing a crane or something like that.
Yeah, well, with the access off Green Street to complete the loop for the laneway, I would think that that's something that could be handled and would solve, as I say, a lot of the issues of conflicts between construction and residents.
Yes, and we'd be happy to comply.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask one other question back on the parking, Mr. Lee? And I'm sure that, I just want to be absolutely clear, I'm sure that the applicant has considered how to comply with the parking requirements without having to park on the swale, and decided that there was no option that would enable that those two outcomes at the same time.
So, look, we accept council's proposal. I mean, the issue for us is that the actual number of cars that would be required, certainly for the residential component and certainly for regular retail, can be completely contained within the building. The only reason that there would be a shortfall is if in the future a cafe was proposed in the location we've identified, then that 106 square metre cafe, according to council's DCP, would require 10 cars, 11 cars. So if we just had, you know, a hairdresser or, you know, something of that ilk, beauty parlour, then there wouldn't be a shortage at all. Now, the reality is that we don't actually have defined uses, and council has indicated a preference not to park on the bioswale, so we will accept that. If your question to me was whether or not we could also consider additional cars below ground, that is not appropriate in this particular instance because, you know, of the history of the site and the contamination on the site.
Yeah, that's fine. All right, thank you.
Just, sorry, Madam Chair, if we're getting into this discussion, I guess that is it possible that in the evolution be slightly reconfigured, even if it were to incorporate a number of stacked cars, one behind each other, in order to increase the numbers? I mean, I think there is a diagram that could be produced. It reduces the access off the laneway, which is another request which has been made. Rather than getting into designing it for you now, it would be, I think, very helpful and beneficial to you if this could be something that's done as part of the design development process.
So, Ross, I would suggest that we did actually have that. We had substantially more cars underneath the building in the location where the store and the bike store and the OSD tank are in our original applications to council. But once again, council asked us to remove that. And they did that because they wanted to minimise the crossovers and the impact on the neighbours at 32 Page Street.
Yeah.
But as I said, we've done 5 versions now for council. I understand that people have differing views, though.
Sure. Okay.
Anything else for the applicant?
No.
Miss Martinelli, were you there? Did you want to address the panel? Maybe not there. Alice Zhang, we were hoping that we could hear from you earlier, but you couldn't. Your microphone wasn't working. I just wanted to check that you are now.
Yes, I'm back online. Sorry about the IT hiccup.
Good. All right. Would you like to address the panel, please? So we've read the submissions that have come through.
Yes.
If you could just draw our attention to anything in particular that you'd like us to consider.
Just want to resonate with Mr. Carmack's comments earlier. I'm not opposed to have a development across on 81 Holloway, but one of the key concerns I have is overshadowing, because I'm a resident on level 1 facing the right of way. Now, I understand that there were shadow diagrams provided on plan form, to demonstrate that my apartment do not have any overshadowing issues. I've requested from council many times to provide elevational shadow diagrams to demonstrate that my apartment which is on level 1, which is the lowest of the entire floor, facing right of way, which is the eastern facade of my apartment, is not compromised of the minimal solar access as per the council DCP. I am yet to receive that, because what I'm worried about is all my bedrooms, my living room and my balcony faces the east. So the only sun I get is in the morning. At the moment, the development that's currently going across from me is 4 stories in height. I'm on level 1 across the road. I'm not convinced that my balcony will achieve the minimum solar access that would be granted, as per the council DCP. So I'd like to really see some, supporting information to give me a bit of reassurance that, like a winter's day, winter solstice, for example, that I will get the minimum sunlight that I deserve in my apartment, because my entire apartment in the habitable space is all facing the east facade. So I've requested the council many times. I understand the applicant have provided shadow diagrams in plan form. The reality is our development is, in overall height-wise, is always taller than the development across the road. So in plan form, our apartment will always be in light, but I like to see a deep dive onto the eastern facade of my apartment to get an understanding what is the shadow impacts of a 4-story development across the road on my end. So I haven't seen any information that's sort of provided to, give me that reassurance that, I'm not going to be living in shadows for the life of this, as long as I live in this apartment that I'm currently living in. I'm just wondering if, I forgot the name, Mr. Lee would be able to.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Mr. Lee, whether there's anything that you can say to Ms. Zhang about her question, whether there is any more information about overshadowing other than what's already been provided.
So, Ms. Zhang, we provided what are known as views from the sun, and what that does is it shows on the 22nd of June, which is the worst day of the year. It shows where the sunlight hits on your facade, and showed it at every half-hour interval, and we provided that to council. Now, I guess possibly we could share it on the screen now if you're interested, but that's really up to the panel. But I assure you that the diagrams of all the apartments facing towards our site show every half hour that there is sunlight between 9 a.m. in the morning on June 22 and 3 p.m. So, there's a complete set of drawings that have been provided to council and the panel on multiple occasions. And I understand that you haven't got them, but I'm happy to show them to you either now in the meeting or at any time that's, preferable for you.
Mr. Lieb, we have 2 other applications that we need to get through, so we probably don't have time to do that in the meeting. But can I just confirm, are those drawings the one that you're referring to, which are on the planning portal at the back of the architectural drawings?
No, they're not. They are the report provided to council called Expert Opinion Solar Access Study, 81 Holloway Street, Pagewood, Walsh Analysis, 8th of February 2022. And furthermore, council's officer wrote to us last week and asked for further copies in response to Ms. Zhang's requests. And so we provided that in a letter to council on the 20th of July, 2022.
Okay, well, thank you.
Whether or not the council officer has provided to you as well.
Can I ask council staff, please, to make sure first thing tomorrow, if that information isn't already on the council's website, if you could please put that onto the website in the morning so that Ms. Zhang can have a look at those drawings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Those sun view diagrams are already on the A tracker.
Okay,
It would make up.
thanks for confirming that. Thanks, Ms. Zeng.
I've
I
got
think
one
that's-
more item.
yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
So
sure.
the second item I want to talk about is noise and dust. I have severe allergies to dust and I have asthma conditions. I am obviously living on the lower floors of 55 Holloway. I have reviewed the developer's application on the waste management plans that's submitted as part of the DA. I did a close study of it where the skip bins and construction waste sorting material bins will be located, which in fact is right underneath my balcony or close vicinity to. I object to this proposal in this instance because I guess I have to look after my health, and I formally request if the developer can review the waste management strategy during construction to mitigate, I guess, minimize the risk of having my allergies reactivated due to dust, and also from, I guess, the construction material delivery perspective. I'd like to request, I guess already been spoken about, is to have all the construction materials, the main ones, to be accessed via Green Street, because at the moment, from what I can see on the original DA submission, the right-of-way is really acting as a delivery material zone. That would significantly increase congestion from traffic perspective, but also the noise and dust that's going to accumulate around the area and outside my window. So I'd like the panel, council and the developer to, I guess, have a relook at that and reconsider the current proposal.
All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Zeng. We've already discussed those issues, and I think that unless Mr. Lee, there's anything else you wanted to say on those issues?
No, just we're happy to comply.
Yeah. So all of those matters the matters that you've raised, plus the matters that Mr. Kalmek have raised, if the application is approved, will be taken into account by the applicant when developing its construction management plan and its traffic management plan for the construction phase. So
is that
I'll
a
draw this matter.
Sorry to cut you off. Finish first.
Not generally, but the applicant's actually offered to consult with the. Are you in the Silkwood building? Yep.
Yes.
So Mr. Sieb has offered to consult with the strata committee in that building about that management plan, and so you can be part of that process if that's obviously that'd be helpful for you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
It's not a condition of consent. It's just because we can't require that for every single development application that comes before council. But Mr. Lee has offered that on behalf of the applicant, so that's something that he, I'm sure, will keep his commitment on.
Yeah. So I guess my key messaging is I'm not objecting to development across to my apartment. I just like to see some consideration made to, I guess, not to have any adverse impact on where I'm living.
Yeah.
To look for a win-win outcome, really, for everyone.
And they're very reasonable issues that you've raised. So thanks very much for taking the time to address the panel. Also to you, Mr. Kalmek, and also all the representatives of the applicant. Very helpful. So we will finish this item, and as I said, we will be discussing the matter after the meeting and reaching our determination, and that decision will be placed on council's website within 7 days. But thanks very much everybody for your attendance this evening. It's been very helpful.
Thank you.
So that brings us to item 6.2, which is 55 to 61 Bona Street, Arncliffe. Just going to get this one up. So this is demolition of existing structures and construction of a Part 4 and Part 6-storey residential flat building containing 26 apartments, rooftop communal open space and basement parking. We have recommendation for approval of this development application, and we have a number of people registered to speak. We have 3 people registered to speak against the recommendation for approval, and we have 4 people registered to speak for the recommendation for approval. So I'll ask Mr. Ross Lawton, who's an affected neighbour. Are you there, Mr. Lawton?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Lawton, you have 3 minutes to address the panel, and you'll be.
Five.
You'll hear a bell at 2 minutes, and if I could just let all of the speakers know that we've all read the submissions and we understand what it is that you have to say, but please do just bring anything in particular that you'd like to draw the panel's attention to. So,
well, I have to apologise. You should also have 3 annexures. I have to apologise in respect of submission 4, because that is partly addressed by paragraph 22 of the draft conditions, but it should specify the size of the openings, whether it's going to be enough for 2 vehicles or 1 vehicle. Certainly
Sorry, Mr. Lawton, can you just go back a step and just talk about, just say what it is that you're referring to?
Oh, sorry. The easement referred to in paragraph 94 of the draft of development assessment.
Yeah.
Talks about, I refer to it as a theoretical solution to future development of 51 and 53 Bonar Street. But in fact, that is partly
just stop for a moment. We'll get that. Is that condition 94? Is it?
Paragraph 94 of the, I think it's the draft development.
It's the basement access.
Yeah,
Proposed car park.
Yeah, there's going to be an easement granted to level 1 and level 2 of the basement.
Yeah.
And I objected because the engineering difficulty, but that is addressed in paragraph 22 of the draft conditions.
Okay.
However, the easement in relation to the stormwater drainage specifies the size of the easement. And my argument is that that requirement for an easement in favour of 51 and 52 should also specify the size of the easement for the sake of clarity. It's not there at the moment.
Okay, well, we can get some advice from council staff on that matter.
The vibration monitoring requirement in paragraph 51 of the draft development assessment, it doesn't actually specify the adjoining property of 53 or my property at 51, which is an attached dwelling. Similarly, the dilapidation report, which is a requirement of paragraph 20 of the draft development assessment, should include my dwelling at 51 Bonar Street because it is an attached dwelling to 53, which is on the list of properties.
Yep.
Now, probably the stormwater drainage, which is a requirement to obtain an easement over 5 Bidjigal Avenue for the...
Which condition?
Yes, it's a development condition to obtain a consent condition. It should also apply to 51 and 53, otherwise there's going to be an impediment to future development. Pardon me.
That's the requirement that there be an easement at the back of the building. Is that the
That's
one
right.
you're talking about?
This application requires an easement to be obtained through number 5, Bidjigal Road.
Yeah.
Before
Commencement issue.
Second.
It's the deferred commencement issue for the development.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that also is likely to be an impediment to the future development of 51 and 53, and that needs to be looked at. So,
Can you just explain why the drainage to the back of the subject?
It's going to cost a lot of money, and it's not going to make it economically viable for development of 51 and 53.
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't been addressed. I mean, if it's a problem for 55 to 61, it'll be a problem for 51 to 53.
Okay, yep, thank you.
Now, the other issue is, I think I raised it, is that the council officer seemed to come to the view that an offer's been made and it's been refused. Now, one of the requirements, well, there's two requirements actually you have to consider in that Caravellis versus Sutherland Shire Council case, which I don't know if I referred to it. Oh, yeah, I did in my submission. Now, there was an offer made July last year for $1.45 million for 51 and 53. Now, I'm not sure if you have documents.
Yeah, we've got all of the offers made, the information provided by the applicant to the council on the offers.
Well, that offer was never refused. And my argument is that the properties are capable of amalgamation. The only reason the offer of $1.45 million did not proceed is because I think you should have an extra A there, I believe.
Yep.
And the terms of the offer were incompatible with our interests because they required a merely 3% deposit and a 16-month settlement. We wanted it over and done. We wanted to sell the places. And any suggestion that these properties can't be amalgamated is quite incorrect. I had suspicions that due to that terms of sale, it's called, of 3% and 16-month settlement, I thought the applicant was running out of funds. So I specifically asked the applicant, do you actually have the funds to proceed with this? And he said, yes. Now, in my view, that could amount to an unreasonable offer because he imposes those sort of conditions.
Well, thank you. That's not, the conditions of the offer aren't.
Well, due respect, they are, because you have to be, no inquiry was made by council. I don't know if you have the Annexure A documents in front of you. That's the last bunch of emails. So you have to be satisfied that amalgamation cannot take place. My submission is amalgamation can take place because the amount of the offer was never rejected. And in fact, you can see I did see the submission by my neighbour at number 53, and she has also indicated she's prepared to proceed with the sale if it can be completed with 3 months. I'm not exactly happy with 3 months, but just for the sake of consistency, 3 months. So these properties can be amalgamated.
Okay, well, we note that. Thank you.
All right, well, that's all I have to say.
Okay, well, thanks very much. We will consider all of that information and take it into account when we're determining the application. But thanks very much for addressing the panel this evening.
All right, thank you.
We had Mr. Les Crompton as well. You there, Mr. Crompton?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm Les Crompton. I'm the president of Bexley RSL. And I guess our concerns are basically with the building next door. Initially,
wrong
sorry. Initially, it looks great, and the amendments they've done to the facade look great.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Crompton, are you
wrong
talking about
project.
Bonar Street, Arncliffe?
Oh no, Bonner Street. No, Bexley RSL.
Sorry, you've been put on my list here for the wrong.
I know where Bonner Street is, but
wrong application.
I'll take a step back. Okay, thank you.
Your one's coming up next.
Oh yeah, I know it's bad too. Thank you.
This one is Bonar Street, Arncliffe. So very sorry about that. It was
That's your name no.
on the wrong list. Lorraine Jeffs. Just check whether
Lorraine has also been put on the wrong list. She's the director of Bexley RSL.
Okay, and a steel bot. Do we have a steel bot? Mrs. Estelle Bott. Is she the Bexley RSL too?
No.
No,
She has a major written submission, Madam
I've just
Chair.
made a written submission. Okay. So sorry about that, Mr. Crompton. If you can just wait another couple of minutes. We don't have any other speakers against the recommendation, and we have a number of speakers for the recommendation. We've got 4 people registered to speak, which we probably don't need to hear from all of you. So if one of you could just address the panel with whatever you'd like to say, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Mead, consultant town planner for the applicant. I will make a short address, and then the rest of the team, including particularly the project architects, are available to answer any questions.
Thanks,
I won't take much of the panel's time to the extent that the applicant concurs with the recommendation of council staff, and we accept all the recommended.
No, I said probably not.
Sorry.
Never take off.
Is somebody on? If I could just ask the other speakers to go on mute, please. Mr. Crompton, are you on mute?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's sorted. Yes, the applicant concurs with the assessment and accepts all the conditions of development consent. The applicants worked very hard with council to resolve issues through the course of assessment of the application, including comments made by council's design review panel along the way. The assessment report, in our view, is testament to that throughout the process. I will deal very briefly with the one objection that was raised. In terms of the matter of site isolation, that's dealt with in section 4.1.9 of the report, page 154 of the business paper. In essence, that summarises the applicant's position in order to deal with the core principles of Carabellis and Sutherland Council. We went through the process. It's a 2-pronged process, as the panel members will know. The first part of the process is making market offer for the land that is allegedly to be isolated. We undertook that process. We had the land valued, and offers were made that were well in excess of the valuation. Those offers were not accepted. We then turned to the second part of the core principle, which is showing the possibilities for that land to be developed in its own right in the future. So there were concept schemes prepared for that land to satisfy the second part of the Carabellis principle. As you can see in the staff report, the staff concurs that both prongs of that core principle have been met, and that land is effectively not isolated for those reasons. In terms of the easement question, I can't talk to the difficulties that an adjoining landowner may have when they may come to develop their land in terms of obtaining easements. That's a matter for them. That said, there is a condition on this consent that the applicant obtains an easement for drainage, and I would expect that if that condition can be complied with by the applicant, that may well pave the way to make it a bit easier for the adjoining landowner when they come to develop their land, in the sense that they may well tie into that same easement, subject to the civil procedures being satisfied. So we don't see that as an impediment or a concern that would see the panel not support the staff recommendation. That's all we wanted to say, because the staff report deals with aspects of the design and the built form and impacts on neighbouring properties in a lot of detail. So it's probably a better use of the panel's time if there's any questions that we might be able to assist with.
Thanks, Mr. Mead. Panel, any questions for Mr. Mead?
No.
I have a fundamental question, Madam Chair, if it's possible. The FSR complies as a 2-to-1, and I presume that is based on the overall site which includes the road widening that's proposed to Bonner Street. The question I have is that in the report it refers to site coverage, and the requirement with the planning controls is that it would be 35%. The figure that is included in our report says that the site coverage is 55.6%. I guess I have two questions. First is this based on the overall site or the reduced site? And do you believe that differential, which is 20%, a significant difference, is something which can be really justified, even though the boundary setbacks may numerically be calculated as compliant? The fact the site coverage is 55.6% and not 35%, to me is somewhat of a concern.
Yes, I'm happy to get the project architect to answer the first question in terms of the calculation being based on the site area pre or post dedication of the road widening, but I'll then come back and respond to your question about the acceptability of that. It is a matter that we've dealt with in some detail in our application, so happy to respond to that. John, if you can just respond to that first part of the question.
Madam Chair and panel, and Ross, good evening. It's based off the overall site, Ross.
Good, that's fine. I mean, I actually believe that the FSR should also be based on the overall site and not the reduced site, so that's helpful. But so 55% is the overall site, so effectively, if you were to do the numbers, with the reduced site, the percentage would be much higher than 55%.
Yes, that's correct. It would be. In terms of you'll see in the staff report that the emphasis is placed on the fact that there's a suite of built form controls that apply to the building envelope on the site, and that suite of controls includes obviously the FSR, but more notably the setbacks, which are set by the ADG, the landscaped area controls, the deep soil provision controls under the ADG, as well as a number of other controls such as private open space and things like that. In terms of the site coverage, yes, the site coverage number is over the DCP requirement. That needs to be put into the context then of the ADG controls. So, for example, the DCP is talking about a 35% maximum site coverage, yet the ADG then talks about needing 7% of the site as deep soil. So there's a slight disconnect between those couple of controls. We say that in terms of throwing all of the controls into the mix, sometimes there is a control, in this case the site coverage control, that's slightly at odds with all the others, to the extent that we can meet every built form control on this site, and then the number that spits out on site coverage is higher than the DCP control. We don't think that reflects the development being an overdevelopment of the site. We think that the primary building envelope controls that should be given the most weight in the assessment are obviously the FSR control, the landscape control generally, the setbacks, the ADG setbacks and so on, because they're the things that influence the contribution of the development to the area character and the context of relationship with neighbouring properties. The site coverage, as you probably well know, excludes the areas that sit above the basement, for example, whilst areas that sit above the basement are still landscaped in this circumstance. And so we say that what is perceived above the ground, the part that contributes to character and contributes to impacts on neighbouring properties and so on, will actually be perceived as different to that to that actual number. So as you can see on the ground level plan, we actually have significant landscaping above the podium of the basement. So the breach is largely a product of the footprint of the basement, and the basement footprint is a product of the car parking requirements that we need to meet. But then we make the best of that design element by still landscaping above it. to contribute as best we can to the landscape character of the locality. So for all those reasons, we say that the DCP control should be applied flexibly, as section 4.15 3A tells us to, in that the objectives of the control are still met.
And in general terms, there's a diagram which represents the urban design guidelines for Bonner Street. In our report, it's on page 157. Do you believe you're fundamentally complying with that diagram?
Yes, fundamentally, yes, we say that we meet the intent of the diagram, yes.
So the discrepancies or non-compliance are the things you're asking for consideration or favourable consideration to be given?
Well, to the site coverage. Site coverage,
like the pergola and the heights, etc., that are there. I mean, the fundamental 10-metre setback from the new boundary has been complied with?
Yes.
I mean, it's just that diagram is a relatively significant diagram within the streetscape and the guidelines that will apply for any other development along Bonner Street. So in your mind, you believe that you have complied with that?
Yes, we do. And I think to add to that is the relationship to 63 to 69 Bonner Street. Obviously the site to the east that's already been developed, we continue the typology and the pattern set by it as well. So we say that we're continuing that pattern, and that pattern is consistent with that DCP image you refer to, but more importantly, a pattern that's already on the ground, and we say is a reasonable outcome.
So some of the non-compliance in terms of height, etc., has been achieved, has been created because in the report it indicates you were not prepared to step down the building as it moves to the south. So because that would destroy the architectural continuity of the building. I mean, is that real? I mean, why would you not step down? So some of the non-compliance, in fact, is not existing, and it may even help the building. It breaks itself up into a number of components, and I guess to my mind it seems a little bit difficult to accept that you can't comply somewhat with the heights and the restricted controls that are in place.
Yeah, we don't necessarily agree with the comments that the building would be improved by stepping it down, and I'll have the architects also chime in on this. But the test for the 4.6 for height needs to be applied in the proper way, which is whether or not the objectives of the control are met, and whether there's sufficient planning grounds to.
I do understand those. I do understand those principles, but I guess it's a judgmental exercise of the extent to which compliance can be achieved rather than tokenly ignored.
And if I can just jump in as well, when there's a 57% exceedance, which is really significant, I think it's a valid point that Ross is making. So I'd be very keen to hear from the applicant's architects on the thinking behind those. So we've all read the 4.6, Mr. Mead, and we all understand the requirements of clause 4.6. I guess the question in my mind is, why was the decision made to avoid those really significant exceedances? What's the justification for that from an architectural kind of perspective?
Yes, yeah, I was trying to get to that. So I'll keep going. I was just setting the framework for the way in which it's assessed, needs to be assessed to the extent that it's not a question of can you comply or not. It's a matter of going through the test. But anyway, in terms of, I think the first place to start is.
I think the panel understands. Panel understands that it's really just a really simple question about.
Yes.
There's a height control. And then this proposal exceeds that control in places by 57%, which is significant. So that's something obviously that the panel really needs to be satisfied about. And so anything that you can say in addition to what you've said in your 4.6 would be helpful to the panel.
Sure, I'm happy to. I think that the height blanket in the 4.6 on page 214 of your business paper is probably the starting point in terms of an appreciation of what the breach actually applies to. So the numerics of saying it's a 57% breach and so on, I think is contextualised by what's shown in that diagram, where in effect what we're actually talking about is the thickness. You can see in figure 2 the thickness of the level that breaches, the thickness of that slab, and then some of those ancillary elements in terms of awnings and things like that. So we say that it's not substantive part of the built form that's actually breaching the height. It's those elements, and those elements sit where they do as a product of the site slope. So there is a site slope of it's in the order of 2 metres from the street to the rear. It's a product of that, and it's also a product of where obviously the line between the two height zones sits. So we say that we're going to the essence or the objective of that transition in height zones. It's a product of the slope and where that line sits as to how that then translates into the architectural form. And so the architectural form meets the guidance and the objectives of that transition with those parts of the building, essentially articulating that facade, but providing essential amenity elements to those private open space areas and so on that you see at those levels. John,
I'd like to
project architect, will chime in as well, because you'd probably rather hear from him than me anyway about it. So
okay, I'd just like to, I guess the initial starting point for us, we were the architects on the project 63 to 69, which is directly beside that, and that was from a number of years ago. And since then, the ADG has come to light. And the ADG has specified certain heights there. We're 3,100 floor to floor. Before, I think we were 3,050 or might have been 3 metres back in those days. Importantly, obviously our height limit's a little bit, our floor to floor is a little bit higher now at 3,100. So you're seeing a bit of a discrepancy there in the 4 levels. That's why that's grown. But our starting point was to respect the building that was the built form of the building next door, not only in terms of levels, and that's why we played with those little facades to try and get a match there, but also in terms of its linear length. And I appreciate that, the site does step down a little bit there, but that's been, we thought that scale in a linear sense was appropriate for that site, and not sort of disjoining it down. We think it does relate to the building next door. In terms of those other breaches that Jeff talked about, when you look at that drawing with the height envelope, they were really to give, they were sort of functional things in terms of, we have the unit faces are compliant. We put the pergola over there to articulate the building. So from the streetscape, there was an appreciation of that, but primarily it's also for privacy onto the communal terrace from above, and also to provide good sun shading and good shade in those communal spaces. And the other areas, the higher level eyebrow, if you like, on that building that you can see on the height plane, was once again just to, instead of it just appearing like a box, to give it a relationship with the architectural language on the lower levels. So they're sort of purely architectural elements. I think when you look at our cover sheet, or those perspectives which are on our DAO2, I'm a strong believer, and I think the tops of buildings shouldn't be, have a skyscape and a visual interest there. So they've been purely architectural things that have been driving that.
That's helpful, thank you. Okay. Any other questions on the DA at all, but also particularly on the height issue or site coverage panel?
No.
No.
I think we're okay. So thank you.
I might just make a comment, Mr.
Yes,
Mead. Just with the level 4 plans, the balconies to the 3-bedroom units are very, very large, 27 square metres. The requirement's only 12 square metres. So just want to know your reasons for making the balconies over double the required size under the ADG.
That question, Jesse. What's driving those? If you have access to our plans, I think a good, when we look at the floor plan there, you'll see that those balconies do have a relationship with the communal open space. So effectively what we've tried to do is screen those balconies, and you'll see from drawing, just get that drawing. If you look at drawing DA003, on the right-hand side image, you'll see that actual balcony. So what we're trying to do is promote the best of both worlds, that we have privacy to the communal open space. It is envisaged that those screens could open. So if you wanted to, if there was no one on the communal open spaces, you have the ability to open those up. But principally, it's to give some private amenity to those units on the edge of those, away from the communal open space, and have their own kind of intimate space.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just what slight clarification for the communal open space. Apparently on level 4, there's an area of 186 square metres. And at the rear, there's a set down and steps down, but none of that area is actually calculated within what is seen to be open space. In other words, the requirement is 300 and something square metres, but we don't meet that either. So technically, there's a non-compliance with the provision of communal open space.
Sorry, just bear with me a lot, so we'll just get back. So communal open space, and there's communal open space there. So that's compliant?
There's communal open space at the ground floor as well. I'm not sure if I'm following the question. Yeah, at the rear, so the ground floor.
Yeah, but in the report it says it's not accessible.
Yeah, it is accessible.
Communal open space you would assume is accessible.
We thought that was better, Ross, to plant out and to try and to really focus on the northern facing communal open space, because the rear open space, just by nature of orientation, is to the south.
But in essence, then you're accepting that the provision of communal open space does not comply with the requirements that would normally happen for a development.
If that ground level is excluded, yes.
Well, it has been excluded according to the report because it's not accessible. So I guess, is there any other area where there could be communal open space provided? There's some at level 4, but I guess there's no other locations where you could meet the requirements for 25% of the site to be given over as communal space.
Yes, that rear area could be made accessible to meet the number. Yes,
could be. I mean, with planter boxes around the site, it could be made accessible.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are guidelines that are set as urban design or planning guidelines, and so to my mind, it's desirable that those guidelines are achieved rather than necessarily avoided.
Yeah, I guess we went around in circles a bit there, Ross, but we have access.
I'm not trying to be difficult, please.
No,
please understand.
I understand.
I'm not trying to be difficult. It's just that each time this sort of discussion happens, it sets a precedent for other projects. And so as a panel, it's something which we are faced with quite frequently. We're told that somewhere else something has been approved and therefore we should approve it. And I guess I'm saying the provision of communal open space is a fairly important thing, particularly these days, and it needs to be desirably accessible. I can accept the inconvenience it may create and the unusability because of its location. I'm saying, therefore, is there anywhere else in the project you can increase the amount of communal open space that is usable and accessible and even desirable and enjoyable?
Yes. I think the communal open space on the upper level, the main communal north facing, could be extended.
Well, that's the question, Madam Chair, I'm asking, in the sense that there are a number of potential non-compliances that could well be addressed and achieved so they're no longer non-compliant.
All right, we might leave it at that, I think.
Thank you.
So thanks very much for your attendance this evening. We will be making our decision after the meeting and...
Chair, apologies. Lorraine Jeffs is still available as a speaker against the proposed.
Oh, Lorraine Jeffs. Thanks, Dawson. Lorraine, are you there? No, I think Lorraine Jeffs was relating to the Bexley RSL matter. Is that right, Dawson? Yeah. So I think we've completed this item and we'll now go on to the Bexley RSL one. So thanks very much, everybody, for the Bonus Street matter, and your information has been very helpful to the panel. Thank you. So on to our last item for tonight, 8 to 18 Stony Creek Road, Bexley. The officer's recommendation is to approve the modification, and I think we have a number of people to speak for that recommendation, and we have a number of people who are actually listed for the previous DA, including Mr. Les Crompton, Ms. Lorraine Jeffs, and Mr. Les Crompton and Ms. Lorraine Jeffs, I think, to speak against the recommendation for the modification to be approved. So Mr. Crompton and Ms. Jeffs, we've read your submissions and all of the other submissions that have been received by council on this modification application, but please go ahead and draw to our attention anything that you'd like to draw to the panel's attention this evening.
Okay, my name's Les Crompton. I'm the president of Bexley RSL. I don't live very far away from here. I have represented state members on Rockdale Traffic Committee and also the Bayside Traffic Committee for the last 20 years. However, my concern is for the safety of the proposal next door, public safety, pedestrian safety. But first of all, I must say that the improvements to the facade make it a very appealing building. So I haven't got a problem with that. But overall, there's 63 metres of frontage, and we have this sort of reduced access point or driveway, if you like. Our concern is that it cuts across the footpath in front of the steps of our club, and also where there's a railing that people get down. When they step, rather than step onto a footpath, they step into a driveway. Being somewhat knowledgeable about the traffic, and I know Mr. Vega's there, I've seen his name up there. What you find on Stony Creek Road, a lot of roads these days, trucks turning, they may be in the inner lane, but they sort of go into both lanes and construct their turn safely into sites, as they do at the top, constantly from Stony Creek Road into Forest Road, so there's no accidents. In that is an issue. It's also pointed out, I believe, that because there's not going to be a supermarket, there won't be the traffic. However, in this day and age, there are couriers, there are other such people delivering, tradespeople, etc. They will also have to use this point. Whether they use the loading dock or they go into another section, I don't know. But the traffic volume will be reasonably solid because there's no setback on this site. So therefore, it's built on the footpath, built to the footpath. So therefore, they've got to park somewhere. So we will have traffic when you've got 60 odd units, people coming and going, and also, shall we say, deliveries. Everything has to come in, everything has to go out, and there's nowhere to park anywhere else unless people are going to run across 4 lanes of shall we say, Stony Creek Road. I note that the original traffic study was done in 2017, some 5 years ago. Since then, the M5 East has had a toll on it, and the traffic has increased something fiercely, which, being a local resident, I'm more than aware of that. So therefore, we believe the traffic volumes are greater, and what you're going to find as well with the design as it is, as much as Mr. Vega points out that there's very clear access for vehicles going into the site, anyone or pedestrian, women, prams, this, that, you name it, kids, whatever, coming down, heading west, there's a wall there and all of a sudden a car appears. Now, that could be a problem, and it'll be exacerbated by the sheer fact that as the traffic these days, in the AM, anyone trying to get out, if they're driving up there to see a spot, they're liable to drive straight out rather than sit and wait. Or if you've got a large four-wheel drive like I have, which a lot of people do have, very popular, they wouldn't get street sight or street or footpath till their vehicle, the entire bonnet, is right out on the footpath. In the case of prams and maybe scooters, people on those
Mr. Crompton, can
scooters.
I just clarify? You're talking about people coming out of the development, or you're talking?
No, not at all. Pedestrian people coming down.
Yeah. Pedestrians.
Sorry. If I
know
I talk
about
fast.
Vehicles not seeing the pedestrians.
Yeah, the vehicles would be exiting the site.
Yeah.
Exiting the site, and I don't know if you know the area very well, but that's fine. If you're walking west down Stony Creek Road, pedestrians, you can be confronted with a car who can't see, but all of a sudden they can see a space to get out. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, there was the fatality at Hurstville Westfields. They have 3 access points. There was a fatality some time ago, just a foot pedestrian. So that's our concern mainly, that it's all right to go ahead. As I say, this building it looks a great building. I note that although it's got commercial content, the RSL and the building next door are both set back, but this one has been approved to be on the footpath or the front of it, no setback on the footpath. But I just think that could be considered, whether they take out a section of the divide between where the trucks are, just take out a section of that to make it safer, because I don't think you'll have 2 vehicles going in at once. So therefore, if that was taken back and something done with a little bit of an apron at the front, so therefore there's a bit of vision, it'll be a lot safer. And that's our concern for our members and also the public, to be quite honest. It's a long term. I've lived in Bexley all my life and see a lot of things happen, but I wouldn't like this to go ahead. I sometimes think maybe we're thinking it will, council maybe think about the building and the success of it rather than the safety, which may have eluded them. That's my concern.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crompton. The panel has already discussed that safety issue and we're very alive to it. So, but it's been helpful to hear from you as well. And we will continue discussing it after in our determination. But thank you very much indeed for addressing the panel this evening.
Thank you. Right.
And Miss Jeffs, do we have
Mrs. Jeffs is coming now.
Mrs. Jeffs, sorry.
It's on.
Hello,
Mrs. Jeffs.
To speak. I'm not sure if you've had a copy of the plan.
We do.
Right. Well, if you look at the front of the building, there's a proposed cut away for access for trucks into the new development that's about a 45-degree angle, which cuts right across in front of the Bexley RSL building. Now, the building is set back, but directly next to where the new building goes is a ramp and a handrail for people entering the club. And as you may be aware, a lot of people in RSL clubs are of an older vintage. So we feel this is a really bad safety issue in that it cuts off our ramp and it also cuts off the stairs, and people are going to have to come down there and virtually walk onto a driveway, which is going to be quite dangerous as we see it. The trucks also will coming along Stony Creek Road and have to enter into this building. are going to have to go left into the building across 2 lanes of traffic, because they won't actually be able to turn from the left lane. They'll have to turn from the right-hand lane. This is going to create a hazard for all the extra traffic that's on there. The other thing that's not shown on here is the bus stop. Now, the bus stop's approximately in front of the stairs of the RSL. And anyone alighting from there will also have to almost immediately walk over this uneven surface to get to where they're going. So to put it briefly, we consider it a total safety issue, that this is cutting across our driveway and cutting across the access to and from the club, and a safety issue for pedestrians walking down or up that street. And we feel that that splayed part should not be allowed. There should be some other way for the trucks to get into that entrance without having the splayed entranceway cut across the front of the RSL footpath. Because it actually takes it right, if you, according to this plan, it takes it right back to our handrail of the building. And I can't quite see how people are going to walk down our ramp and not walk directly onto the driveway. So that's our main concern. Our other concern is there is no setback for this building, whereas all the other buildings along here are setback. And if council or Main Roads did want to increase the width of Stony Creek Road, there's no provision that they could use any part of that site as a new traffic lane or part of a traffic lane. It also does not show there, it may be a minor point, and it may be addressed in the development application, but also right across in the middle of the footpath, right across where that 45-degree angle is, there's a Telstra pit that would have to be relocated. And that might be a minor area, but it does, from our point of view, we have not seen that has been addressed. The other thing is, with the buses stopping at that point, with the huge amount of traffic we now have on Stony Creek Road, we've got trucks going there. Every 5 or 6 cars you'll have a truck because of the closure of the or the tolls on the M5. We will think that people in the left, the bus will be parked in the left-hand lane. People in the right-hand lane will try and get round the bus, and then they collide either with people that are crossing over this driveway. And we feel that that's another safety issue, that the people alighting from the bus are also going to have this problem.
Thank you. Yeah, we do have a photograph that shows the bus stop and where it is in relation to the proposed building. So we understand that. Thank you.
That's my submission. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for addressing the panel this evening. I think that's they're the only speakers that we have against the recommendation. We have a number of speakers for the recommendation. Having regard to the time, I'm just going to ask any representative of the applicant who would like to focus on the safety issues which have been identified by the submissions and by both speakers this evening. These are issues that the panel has also discussed prior to the meeting, and we have some concerns about. So it would be value hearing from the applicant about what you have to say about the interface and pedestrian safety, particularly people coming out of the RSL and also people using the bus stop.
Sure. Madam Chair, can you hear me? It's Jared Teresi. Yeah.
Sorry, who's speaking?
Jared Teresi.
Yep.
I'm the applicant's consultant planner.
Yep.
Mr. Varga, who's a traffic engineer, is also present. I probably would just, Mr. Varga will probably more specifically deal with the more, I guess, technical question on that. But I guess just from a planning point of view, I think it's just important just to acknowledge that this is a modification to an existing approval.
We do appreciate that, Mr. Teresi, but we also have to think about.
I understand that. But I think, I guess, in terms of public record, it's probably important just to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
It is a modification.
Yep.
The driveway locations have not changed from what was approved. What we have done as part of the process is that we have agreed with the council in introducing some additional measures, which there's conditions of consent, which talks about a flashing light for the loading dock, and also obviously a speed hump at the entry. I guess the only thing I would like to emphasise before I give it to Mr. Varga is that we did also prepare a photo montage specifically to demonstrate how the building actually interacts with the Bexley RSL Club, and that's shown on page 275 of the officer's report. And I guess. Yeah, and the reason we did that was that we thought that helps visualise how the building has been designed in a manner to try to deal with some of those sight lines and whatnot. So certainly something we are conscious about and obviously designed accordingly. But I guess that's more in the broader context, and it's probably better for Mr. Varga to more drill down into the more technical side. So Mr. Varga, I might just pass on to you now.
Thanks, Mr. Teresi. Mr. Varga, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following on from what Mr. Teresi said, in terms of visibility and sight lines, if I could take the panel to page 274, it shows an extract of the plans, which shows a large setback on the exit driveway from the car park, which is proposed. It's highlighted in yellow on that diagram so that there's clear view between pedestrians and drivers as they're exiting.
Just wait a minute for us to orientate ourselves.
Sure, page 274.
Yeah, I've got the page. I'm just trying to work out what's going on here.
There's a zoomed in diagram there showing an entry and exit from the car park.
Yep.
Yes.
See on the left hand side, and then highlighted in yellow is a large opening in the wall beside the exit side of the driveway, and that will allow exiting drivers to see pedestrians as they're walking along the footpath. And that opening, the size of that opening exceeds Standards Australia AS 2890.1 figure 3.3 requirements for pedestrian safety. And then if I could take you to page 276.
Can I just ask about that? So people will see, the drivers will see pedestrians coming along from the.
That's right.
The east, but they obviously won't see pedestrians walking along from the west.
Well, they will, because they'll be able to see pedestrians walking along across the entry side of the driveway, and also between the columns that separate the car park driveway from the loading dock.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get a better idea of that looking at the diagram on page 276. On that diagram, if you've got it in front of you, you can see the large opening on the exit side of the car park driveway on the right hand side of the diagram. You can also see that the wall between the loading dock and the RSL club is cut back by about 3.5 metres, or set back 3.5 metres from the footpath. So that in effect, the driveway between the loading dock and the RSL club is open. So pedestrians and drivers can see each other. And I think that's actually what Mr. Compton was asking for, is what's shown there on that diagram.
Can I just make sure I understand? So I'm looking at this, and at the top left-hand side of this drawing, there's a vertical black line.
That's the wall.
That's the wall, and you're saying that stops early.
Yes, you can see there's a red line that runs across from left to right.
Yep.
In front of the building, that's the edge of the footpath.
Yep.
So from that red line, you go back 3.5 metres to the wall that's going to be constructed between the club and the loading dock entrance, so that pedestrians and drivers will have clear view of each other. Now, Australian standards only requires 2.5 metres, but the setback in this case that's proposed is 3.5 metres. So it exceeds Australian standards requirements for pedestrian safety.
Yeah, we've got that. Thank you. Anything else?
Well, the only other thing I'd mention is just following up on what Mr. Teresi said, well, this is a less intensive use of the site than what was previously approved. The driveway is consistent with what was previously approved, except the setbacks have been increased. But again, it's a less intensive use of the site because the supermarket's no longer proposed, it's just conventional retail. So there'll be fewer deliveries and less traffic in the car park. Oh, there was one other point in terms of Mrs. Jeffs mentioned the footpath. The footpath will have a normal vehicle crossing at the curb. The footpath itself will still be level, so there'll be a smooth footpath, just like there is at most more recently constructed driveways. So the vehicle crossing only extends for 450 millimetres from the curb, but the rest of the footpath will be even or flat.
How does that increase safety?
Well, Mrs. Jess was raising a concern that she mentioned that the footpath surface was going to be uneven.
Yeah.
But that in effect is not correct. The footpath level will be flat or consistent all the way across the driveway.
So it's going to be the same level as the driveway. The footpath merges into the driveway.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Good evening, panel. It's Tony Shrage from Urban Property Group. Sorry to interrupt. Could I kindly share the screen just to elaborate on this particular issue?
Yeah, you're very unclear. Actually, we can hardly hear you. But I think I just said you said you want to share the screen.
Yes, please. Thank you.
And sorry, who's speaking? Just for the record.
Tony Shrage from Urban Property.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. So, if you can please confirm that you can see the screen.
I can see
We can see the screen. We can see your screen. Thanks.
Yes. So, Rob, could you please explain? So this is the existing vehicle crossing. We're extending it. It's already extending beyond the boundary, or maybe just on the boundary, as you can see. And we are marginally extending it further.
So you can see there that the vehicle crossing at the curb is that short ramp that extends for 450 from the gutter invert, and it goes up to the footpath, and the rest of the footpath is even, and that's going to stay the same. It'll still be even in the future. So there's no uneven surface, it's just normal footpath surface.
So when a person's walking out of the club down the stairs and they're turning left towards your development.
Yep.
So there'll be a flashing light if somebody's coming out of the development.
That's correct.
And they just have to have their eyes peeled to see if anybody's going into the development, because they'll be going into the development right next to the stairs. Is that right? It's the entry next to the stairs and the exit to the right.
Well, they'll see the traffic if they're turning right, that's 3 or 4 metres away. And similarly, if they're coming down the stairs, they'll also see anyone that's coming out of the driveway, which is also 3 or 4 metres away. So they've got good visibility in both directions.
Mr. Barker, can I just ask, why is display needed? I've never seen a development where the driveway encroaches onto the neighbouring property unless there's some sort of agreement between those owners. So what's the reason for display, and does it comply with Australian standards?
Yeah, it does comply with Australian standards, and it's a requirement of Transport for New South Wales that trucks, or any vehicle for that matter, turns left into the driveway from the left-hand lane. If they straddled 2 lanes, for example, display wouldn't need to be as big, but that's the way Transport for New South Wales wants it.
So you've got a 63 metre frontage. Why can't display be incorporated into the development frontage?
Because when the driveways are located on the side boundary of the development rather than the middle of the boundary, rather than the middle of the site. If the driveways were located at the middle of the site, it'd have some pretty terrible urban design outcomes that would dominate the design of the building. So the general idea from an urban design point of view is you always put the driveways to one side along the boundary rather than dominate the centre of the site.
And do you know what the thinking was behind putting the driveways next to the RSL rather than if accepting what you're saying is that they shouldn't be right in the middle of the site? The driveway could have been over on the other side.
It's trying to keep it away from the intersection opposite.
Yeah.
Which is generally, you're not supposed to have driveways opposite an intersection.
Yeah.
So it's been moved to the left as much as possible.
Madam Chair, I have a question, if I can, please.
Yes, please do.
I noticed that it appears now that the loading dock area has a turntable that will allow the trucks to actually go into the loading area forwards and come out forwards. I guess my question is, if there is a truck in the loading dock, the width of the ramp from the street to the loading dock is not going to allow for 2 vehicles to pass. And there would appear to be nowhere to hold a vehicle if there is already something in the loading dock. In other words, I cannot understand how this actually is workable in the sense that, sorry, let me finish, Mr. Varga, if you don't mind, that when I look at the drawing, firstly, the complication of 4 lanes, 2 in, 2 out in one position is something that I believe is less than highly desirable. But then when I look at the drawing, if some truck does arrive and there is already a vehicle in the loading dock, what happens? Because there is nowhere for a truck to be held or to be able to egress from the loading dock. I believe previously there was a different solution. And I guess going right back to the very beginning, yes, this is a submission which is a modification. And naively, I guess I have always hoped that when there's a modification, some of the issues that have been previously raised get addressed and improved as part of a modification.
A couple of points, if I may. Firstly, it's a less intensive use of the site than what was previously approved. The driveway is the same as what was previously approved. It was always a single lane driveway. And there will be a loading dock management plan which will ensure that the deliveries are separated and timed, because pretty much all of the deliveries are going to be regulars. So they'll separate them so that they don't come together, they don't come at the same time. But the bottom line is
what happens, Mr. Varga, if a truck does arrive and turns into the loading dock entrance and there's a truck already there?
Well, it's unlikely to happen because there'll be a loading dock management plan, but you could have a light at the front entrance that just says loading dock occupied. But I come back to the original point that it's a less intensive use of the site than what was previously proposed or previously approved with the same driveway arrangement.
Okay. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
I think we've lost our chairman. Hello.
Actually, that the chair has dropped off. We'll try and reconnect with her.
Yeah, in the interim, do panel members have any further questions?
Good evening. Good evening, panel members. I've also registered to speak, and I haven't been able to put forward my presentation. My name is Tony Shrage. I'm from Urban Property. We recently purchased the development site from a liquidator. The previous owner had gone into liquidation after commencing the construction, and we purchased it with the hope of developing the site. When we first purchased the site, we looked at areas where we could improve the design and the product, and we did our best endeavours to do so. As you can see on the ground floor, we decided to reduce the ground floor footprint. In particular, we removed the nil setback towards the north, which was kind of non-desirable back of house to a future supermarket. We provided additional landscape and additional daylight access to the rear of the commercial to give it dual frontage, additional deep soil, etc. And we approached council at the time with the intention to remove the need for a large rigid vehicle to service the site, because we believe that a supermarket will never happen. Typically, in our previous developments, and we have been around for a long time, we tend to keep the commercial as a stratum, and we choose whether to sell or keep the residential above. In this particular development, we've also would like to keep the commercial. Not that it makes a difference to the panel's consideration, but I'd like to mention that. And we know that our future tenant will not be a supermarket, simply because when we approached the various supermarkets, we understood that we'll never achieve the number of car spaces that they require, namely 75 car spaces for an Aldi, and our consent, I think, has 36 or so car spaces, so nowhere near what a supermarket would require to operate. So in our first steps, when we approached council, we've informed them that we don't feel the need for a large vehicle to service the site, and we have discussed that the largest vehicle that we'll need to service the site will be council's waste collection vehicle. Welcome back, Marcia. Tony Shrage from Urban Property Group. We put forward a submission that the largest vehicle that we require to service the site will be the council waste management vehicle, which requires 3.5 metre clearance and far less turning space than a 12.5 metre large rigid vehicle. That will enable a small rigid vehicle to enter the site and leave in a forward direction without the need of a turntable, and council's waste vehicle to go in, use the turntable and leave the site. And council's engineers were of the view that the large rigid vehicle is desired to remain, despite that a supermarket is not proposed, to future-proof the proposal. Rightfully or wrongfully, we agreed, because we are pressed for time, as the site is currently supported by hydraulic props, currently being dewatered every time it rains, and with a La Nina year prospected again for next year. It's not good prospect for a site that's underground that we can't do much with. So typically, Mr. Crompton, typically we do approach our neighbours. We're friendly people, and people, normally we get along with our neighbours. I was hoping to meet the neighbours at the Bexley Chamber of Commerce. I attended and I met quite a few of the Bexley locals, and I'm hoping to meet with the RSL at a time, and work with them like the good neighbours we are, and see what concerns they have. I didn't think it was appropriate for me to contact the RSL so close to the panel meeting. It would have maybe seen as, wrong timing or not the best approach. But we here, we like to work with council. Any good suggestions? And we have agreed to introduce safety measures such as the flashing lights and the beeping sound, whichever way that condition was worded, that council proposed, to assist with the safety of the pedestrians. However, I would like to make just two points, and they're from a layman's perspective because I'm not a traffic engineer. In our discussions with council's engineers and our traffic engineers, we're still in discussion of the civil design for the footpath, because it's one of the requirements that we work with council to ensure that the footpath is built to council standards, and that includes the levels and the maximum falls. And I understand that along the footpath, a maximum fall is 2.5% for a footpath to be safe to pedestrians. Our civil design that we have submitted to council shows 2.5 or shallower in that location. And I have discussed this with Christopher Thompson, council's traffic engineer, and he agrees that it is something that we will work closely prior to council approving the civil design, which is a condition that's required in this consent. So we have committed to work closely with council to ensure that not only we ensure that the footpath is built to 2.5 or shallower, which is the civil requirements for a footpath, to be looked at as a safe footpath, and that's across Bexley, across New South Wales. That's typically 2.5%. So we will be doing that, and therefore there won't be a question whether the footpath is an uneven surface or an unsafe or whatnot. So it comes to then two other points, which are vehicles entering and leaving the site, and whether the layback that currently sits in front of the RSL's boundary is acceptable. Now, we have quickly shown that the existing driveway on the site that's currently there now has its layback protruding or very close. I mean, the survey shows it to be slightly protruding in front of the RSL's boundary. Now, driveways do that. Yes, we are proposing to, we're not proposing actually, it was actually approved like that, but our driveway shows to be, moving a little bit further to the west to allow that large truck to turn. But if we are proposing a smaller vehicle, which is the council waste management vehicle, and that's all we need for this development, we don't need a large truck to service the site. It was only an idea to future-proof it that we agreed to. That potentially allows us, Mr. Varga, please correct me if I'm wrong, to move the layback to its current position, and therefore we're not making it worse. That's one point. The other point, in terms of vehicles entering and leaving the site, I note that vehicles entering and leaving the site in that location are only the loading vehicles. By only, I'm not sort of diminishing the fact that there are large vehicles entering, but the frequency of those are nowhere near the frequency of the cars that are going in and out for the residents and the commercial tenants, which is a further 8 or 9 meters away from the boundary. So the interactions with pedestrians going in and out of the RSL by our future tenants, being commercial or residential, there's a buffer there. Now, the management of the commercial driveway How do we do that? How do we ensure that is to everyone's satisfaction? And yes, I agree that I know that it's approved, but I agree that the safety of our neighbours is something for us to consider. So if I could put forward to amend the condition to reduce the size of the truck that needs to service this site from a large rigid vehicle to council's waste management vehicle, we're happy to have the commercial and the couriers and whatnot, if they're vans or they're commercial vehicles that can enter the basement. We're happy to have a loading dock in the basement to allow vans and the like to reduce the frequency of vehicles entering the loading dock. We would like to work with you, but at the same time, to ask us to redesign at this stage is unfair. For us to shuffle driveways and move the driveway across, there's banks involved. There's serious works happening in the background. We have resources allocated to move forward with the projects. It's currently, you could see the website, Park on Bexley. It's being marketed, and we're talking to future potential buyers. By the way, Urban Property Group is a company that's is a developer who's RCERT rated. So we were one of the first to work with the Commissioner and the Commissioner's team to get our RCERT accreditation. And we take pride in our work and our projects. But we believe it will be extremely unfair for the panel to hold off our development when we are putting our hands up and saying, we are happy to work with you, but please don't delay us. That's my piece. Sorry, Marcia, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt, and thank you for your submission. It's just getting very late in the evening, so we've all listened carefully to what you have to say, but I'd like to draw a close to this item now. So thanks very much to everybody for your attendance this evening and for addressing the panel, which has been very helpful. I'm going to close the formal meeting now, and the panel will make its deliberation and make its decisions in relation to each of the agenda items. So good evening, and thanks again for your attendance.
Thank you.
If you could all leave the meeting, that'd be great. Dawson, if you can tell me when we have...
Correct. I've just sent off the request for the live streaming to be turned off. I will let you know when I have acknowledgement of that.
Thank you.